Hello again to another video. Today we'll be watching why Norway's churches look weird, and they made by Romulus Hog. Yeah. And my name is Aga. You're watching Aga Calero, and let's start. And play.
This video was made possible by CuriosityStream. If you visit a European country and like to think of yourself as a well-traveled, pretentious intellectual, you'll definitely take some time to admire the buildings around you. You'll point to one and say, yes, that's a cathedral, history. And that's one of the special things about the place. It looks old. But if you look closer, Europe looks another way as well. Everything is stone. Cathedrals, the most popular attractions, are made with local materials, and robust buildings, rock. They're made of rock. In Venice, cathedrals are white, and that's because of the white-colored Istrian stone. In Paris, the Notre Dame is cream, and that's because of the cream-colored Parisian Lutetia limestone. And if you go up north, churches become brick. Not easily accessible limestone gave rise to an artificial alternative. The north had plenty of clay and little quarries.
I'm kind of interested that North.
But stone and brick are
a
not
lot
the
of Germany
only materials churches can be built out of.
Poland as well.
There's also wood. In Norway, you can find 28 stave churches, some of the most unique buildings on the European continent that look out of this world. Norway is home to the oldest and last of their kind, wood churches that have lasted centuries. That's no small feat, because wood has a reputation for decaying. And there's a reason these churches look weird, that they're as strong as they are, and that you can only find them in Norway.
Snow, I guess, isn't it?
Fennoscandia is a place of timber, while continental Europe is a place of masonry. And that makes sense. Wood is a great insulator. You need more stone if you want to insulate the same as wood. And up north, insulation matters especially. And that's okay, because luckily there's plenty of wood to go around. Compared to the continental, Northern Europe is pretty damn forested. And that's because agriculture doesn't help trees, and complex landscapes don't help agriculture. And Norway is very complex. It has a massive coastline, with the west fragmented by mountains and cut into complex networks of fjords and rivers. It's a landscape that can help make experienced wood boat makers, but it makes wide-scale deforestation difficult. It also hinders communication, which helped reduce the spread of Christianity that came to Norway later than most. And when Christianity did come, it wouldn't come normally. Between 1100 and 1300, when stone churches were in vogue and built en masse, in Norway, thousands of wooden stave churches would be built instead. If we bring our attention to Sweden, we can begin to understand why. In Kalmar, Sweden's stave churches would turn from timber into stone, but there was a pattern. Materials clustered. Stone churches belonged next to each other and on the coast, and wood churches were remote. High-density areas gave access to more and better labor, easier accessible stone, and also came with easier land to build upon. But in remote locations, craftsmen were masters of wood. No, not stone. And wood was more accessible and cheaper than building with rock.
I don't
It's
think
why
I've
you'll
seen a lot
find the
of people
Norwegian
using
stave
that kind
churches
of
of
animation
today
to
in some of the
do their videos
farthest
too.
remote places and obscure fjords and high valleys. The limited Norwegian stone architecture that did occurred in places with density. But stone was more than evidence for accessible materials, a certain amount of density, or a good location. It's also evidence of a status-hungry, rich elite. See, big stone churches and castles are in some ways the historic big dick measuring contest of the medieval ages. And Norway is weird because historically it had fewer and poorer landowners compared to other parts of Western and Northern Europe. And that's because topography and geography can do more than lead to wood houses. The argument goes, Norway sucks for cultivation. Only around 3% is arable. That's not a lot. And it's much worse than Denmark and southern Sweden, who have wide fertile valleys and large continuous plains with moraine soil. The reason this matters is because large plains with good soil can lead to agricultural yields that provide easier surplus for elites, who now have an easier time gathering the manpower and then resources to produce big stone buildings. But if you have rugged, segmented land that doesn't produce easy centralization, and you don't have arable land that provides easy surplus resources, you're going to have a poor elite that won't be able to easily build with stone. Add on the fact that Norway is made of largely harder metamorphic rock, while continental Europe has easier access to limestone and sandstone, the ultimate soft stone building materials, and you create a recipe for a stone disaster. Norway doesn't have many stone buildings whatsoever, and of the ones that are built, they're smaller in size and made of super weird materials like soapstone. Soapstone is a crazy stone. Literally nobody builds with soapstone except for Norwegians.
I never even heard about
weird.
soapstone. What is a soapstone?
Of the ones that stand today, we can generalize them as three, ranging from simple to increasingly complex. What unites them all is the stave, stav, a vertical piece of wood. Church builders would begin by selecting especially tall trees, either Scotch pine or Norwegian spruce, and especially strong and straight wood. And they would trim those trees, removing their tops, bark, and branches, and then leave them for years before cutting them down, giving ample time for the sap of the tree to drain into its roots. This would solve multiple problems. The trunks would have less chance for splitting, and they'd be lighter, which made them easier to move. And now the roots, with higher concentrations of sap, could be placed on top of fire in order to extract very valuable black tar, which would come in handy later. See, the churches were to be built on specific natural landmarks where they'd be especially at risk of facing elements like wind, rain, and snow. So the church builders had to do whatever they could to make the buildings as robust as possible. And luckily, the builders were far from amateurs. They built the churches on rough local stone to protect the bottom of the church from rot. And they built the churches so they'd be able to withstand vertical loads produced by snow, while also remaining stable enough facing lateral forces that came from hard winds. After the church was finished, builders would then apply the black tar that they collected from the original timber to make the wood hydrophobic. This tar gave the churches their unique black texture, and it still needs to be reapplied today. However, the recipe for the most effective tar has been lost, so it's applied more often today than it would have been in the past. No wood detail was ignored. Where the trunk ended but the roots began could also be saved to make the curved knee braces, the most frequently used brace in the church. What the builders knew then is that the base of a tree had to be especially tight and strong, and so it could be repurposed for additional structural integrity.
Can you imagine the amount of work that they had to put into that?
Staves,
like not only that
unclear
just
exactly what was
cutting
done
out
to
the
them,
tree, but
are made of much
digging out the
superior
roots as
lumber
well?
than what we have today, and we don't know how to make the same staves. Even the pins and connectors that held the wood together were made out of common juniper, known for being especially rot resistant. The wood that held the vertical staves between the larger ones had subtle carved holes that could be used as drains for water. But if we look even closer, we see much more than the fingerprints of experienced wood craftsmen. The walls of the stave churches are not just connected, but they're connected with lap joints, similar to what the Vikings used to connect the hulls of their ships. Flip the trusses at the top of the church upside down, and you get a similar design to that of the foundation of a Viking ship. The Borgund Stave Church, one of the oldest and largest, has dragons at the top of its roof, a common symbol in Norse paganism. And oddly enough, the dragons are placed higher above the symbols for Christianity. These churches, remote that they were, made it also a bit easier for those that built and used them to cling onto their Norse past. The stave churches aren't just wood, you see. They're a beautiful baby bastard of Christianity and Norse paganism. In some of the stave churches, you can find remnants of a central mast going within the church nave. Odd when that's not exactly desirable in a church, and even weirder given the fact that the builders would know how to build otherwise. So some theorize it was an intentional spiritual addition, a connection to the Axis Mundi, the world tree in the Norse religion. Within the churches, you can find intricate wood carvings and ornaments as well as wood heads, not too far from the documented wood poles with faces that early explorers saw Vikings give sacrifices to. Even the pillars of wood themselves within the church aren't too far from a grove of trees, an incredibly important symbol in pagan religion and rituals. But it goes even deeper. Many churches come with explicit portals, often featuring the Last Judgment. The stave churches also came with portals, but not of the same scene. Instead of Christ, they showed fantasy animals, like massive snakes and dragons fighting each other, twisted in vines. It doesn't seem like it's referencing Christian Judgment Day, but instead Ragnarok, Doomsday for the Norse. So no, the churches aren't really weird. They're just a product of evolved apes adapting to their local circumstances and constructing things that reflect the local environment and materials. And if you want to know more about evolved apes, I highly recommend checking out the most insane series I've seen on evolved apes in my lifetime, Becoming Human. It's creatively directed by one of the best team of editors I know on this planet, who are the only ones that go as far as they do to visually explain monkey skulls. I mean this with no exaggeration. There are literally no documentaries on this planet visualizing and explaining human evolution like they are. And you can only watch it by signing up for the Streamy Award-nominated streaming service, Nebula, which has thousands of other unique titles that you can binge afterwards. And the best way to get Nebula is by signing up for the Curiosity Stream Nebula.
Okay, that was very interesting. I feel like I keep repeating myself saying that. I need to get something different to say. But yeah, it's just... I never really thought about why certain places like buildings, the old buildings in certain places look that way and they're all similar to each other in that region or something like that. And now that actually that explains a lot. So, what did you think about? Because I thought that was a very well done video as well. I really like those animations too. Definitely gonna subscribe to Hog. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.